Yo, my people, welcome back to another episode of the Yellow Gloves podcast, your one stop shop for all things Cage Warriors. I'm recording this the morning after Cage Warriors 175, which took place in Manchester. An absolutely insane 18 fight card where we had a fight of the year contender without a doubt. We had finishes plenty. We had some amazing back and forth scraps, some big prospects getting wins, but also some big prospects getting knocked down a peg by significant underdogs on this card. We also had a title fight as our headliner, and I guess that's where we should start first with Robin Roos versus the middleweight champion Dario Bellandi for, of course, middleweight gold. This one was a really interesting matchup, I think, because obviously Robin Roos, a pretty unknown guy around these parts. Obviously, has never fought in Cage Warriors, but also hasn't really fought in any kind of massive promotions. So the matchmaking was interesting here. Obviously, a very active finisher, 7 wins, all seven via finish, but a 7-4 record, not really a needle mover in any way. Former opponent of George Hardwick, actually, at 170 pounds, but effectively his Cage Warriors debut and getting a crack at gold. I had a feeling he wouldn't do so well purely because in all the promotional stuff he was like, they tell me I'm fighting Dario Bellandi. I've never watched this guy fight, but he must be good because he's champion. And immediately I was like thinking this is one of those cases where a guy comes in, focuses solely on himself and on what he can execute and doesn't really pay much attention to what his opponent does, which, don't get me wrong, can sometimes be beneficial. And Roos has a winning record, so I assume he's been doing this his whole career. So clearly it pays off in some fights. But when you're facing a guy who's 7-1 and also champion of a credible organization, then it kind of it's a bit baffling. But anyways, Dario Bellandi really needs no introduction around these parts. But if for whatever reason you do need that introduction, Bellandi 7-1 coming into this fight, making his first title defense. 5-1 in Cage Warriors, captured the belt in November last year, defeating Mick Stanton actually, and his sole loss is to Will Curry, who is going to be on Dana White's Contender Series, I believe. So no shame in losing there, and probably if Curry wasn't going on to the Contender Series, I imagine that probably would have been the fight that they would have made because it's super compelling and it just would have been a great rematch. And let's just tuck right into this fight. It wasn't great. I'll be completely honest. I mean, this card was amazing, and this fight was not probably this fight was easily the most underwhelming on the card, in my opinion. Uh, I had a feeling that Roos would come in, take the first round, be very active, be very energetic, but eventually Belandi's grappling pace would break Roos. I was half right in that, I scored the first round 10-9 to Roos. He was battering Belandi's lead leg, and actually he was looking like he had Bellandi in some real trouble. Bellandi looked gassed after the first round and a half. But what I liked from Bellandi, to give him his flowers, was he adjusted. He noticed Roos was pressing, and Bellandi started to go to the body and started to fight behind his jab. It gave him the ability to back Roos up a little bit and make Roos a bit more concerned about what's coming his way, but also pressure Roos onto the fence, right? The Belandi body jab, body jab, body jab. This was what backed Roos up against the cage. And once that happened, it was just takedown after takedown from Belandi. Roos, almost getting caught in a guillotine, got back to his feet in round two. But generally, Belandi was just, jumped Gilly at one point as well, or twice even. Um, Rolled through as well and almost got the finish. Belandi took his back towards the end of the round, almost got the rear naked choke in. It was more of a short choke, kind of cranking. Um, Maybe if there was a bit more time on the clock, he might have been able to get the submission. But I scored the second round to Belandi, and I can't overstate how massive that was because Roos looked like he was going to steamroll Belandi after that first round, which again I kind of suspected would be the case. But how the rest of the fight would play out kind of surprised me a bit because I thought, okay, Belandi's now, he's figured it out. He's jabbing to the body. He's keeping Roos at the end of straight shots, and he's backing him against the fence. When he gets him into the fence, kind of these body locks or front body locks, dragging Roos down and sitting on his back for pretty much the whole round. That was round three. The optics weren't great for Belandi after 3 rounds. He looked tired, he looked lethargic, he looked slow. But Roos was completely broken on the ground. I mean, apart from having decent rear naked choke defense, not fighting the hand that's locking behind the head instead of the hand on that's applying, or the arm that's applying the choke. It was good rear naked choke defense, but for the most part, there were instances in this fight where Belandi, three instances to be precise, where Belandi had Roos's neck, had the arm under the neck, and Roos was just giving Mark Goddard the thumbs up, like I'm good here, and you could see the arm under the neck. Like Belandi had no squeeze, no real energy. I don't know if maybe an issue cutting weight coming into this fight. I mean, never, Belandi's never really been a fast guy. Don't get me wrong, but he's never been this lethargic. And look, we're talking about a guy who went on to win 49-46, arguably 49-45. Aside from dropping the first round, absolutely dominated everything after. It's more, like I said, the optics weren't great for Belandi in my opinion. But yeah, I just the rear naked choke stuff was weird because the arm was definitely under the neck multiple times, and I don't know. It just seemed like Belandi just could not get the squeeze enough to make Roos struggle, even though there were points where it looked like he might be able to draw the tap. But I scored it 49-46 Belandi. That was his first title defense. Quite a rough watch, like I say. I expected Roos to phase out after 7 to 8 minutes, which happened, but equally expected Belandi to find a quick sub thereafter. So Belandi improves to 8-1, and it kind of begs the question now: what happens now at middleweight? And James on Twitter, J Middle Scheme on Twitter, messaged me and said, if this is roughly the current state of middleweight, where does the division go from here? Many of these guys will be moving weight classes and promotions too. So he's provided me a list here, and it's got Will Curry as kind of his number one ranked guy. And obviously, as we know, Will Curry, Dana White's Contender Series. Naglias, Kanisauskas, I think would be interesting. They have fought before, and not that long ago in 2023, last year, really, in September, I think it was, or no, July. Typology says July. So interesting fight ish. I remember Belandi dropping the first round and then dominating the final two segments, which is kind of Belandi's thing. But yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing Naglias in there. Then we've got Carlos Pereira, Darren Stewart, and we know Stewart is a 205er probably. Like, will he drop back down to 85? What's Stewart's stock like? It doesn't seem like he's. I don't know. Like, I follow Stewart on social media. I don't know that Stewart is still actively looking for fights, in all honesty. Obviously, 16-10, Darren Stewart, former middleweight champion. But yeah, last fight was to Carlos Pereira at light heavyweight. It was more of a catchweight bout, wasn't it? I think 195. But yeah, Carlos Pereira also on James's list here. Again, it felt like he was coming in for Darren Stewart to batter him. I don't know that we probably see him again, in all honesty. And then you've got Jati Milan, who we haven't seen in a long while. Leon Aliu wouldn't be bad, in all honesty. I don't mind Leon Aliu. Obviously, you've got the Italian connection there. The thing with Leon Aliu, though, you know, two losses in Cage Warriors, relatively close together. Did beat Alan Carlos, then had the James Webb victory, which was good. So, by and large, 2 and 3 in the promotion. I don't know that he slots in, but it wouldn't be bad. I mean, this is the slim pickings that we're talking about. You've also got James Webb, who has moved up, Samir Caddy, who maybe. Francesco Mazzeo, I really like the sound of that. Mazzeo might be a little too green, but probably someone in the next 18 months who likely does step in and have a crack. But Michael Chamu is the last one on James's list. Chamu, a fun banger, but I don't know that his record allows him to come in and get a title shot. And I think that's what James is alluding to here. Like, what happens with middleweight, because we don't know, right? Like, this. It's not that it's a weak division. It's just that all the good guys have kind of moved on. So I think this is going to be a case of we might start seeing more guys coming in making their debuts in a title shot, like Roos did, like we had the same way we had Jan Lias come in. Those kind of fighters who might have good records outside of Cage Warriors and within Europe, and then come in and have a crack at gold. I think that's probably what we're looking at, in all honesty, at middleweight, because there doesn't seem to be a great deal at the moment, and the guys who are almost there might be too green, And for me, I mean, I'd like Naglias Kanisauskas a lot. It's more that we've seen that fight a year ago, and it wasn't incredibly competitive after the first round. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. But again, I don't want to shit on Bellandi. At the end of the day, he dominated a fight. He removed all the danger away from it. Grappled, that's where he butters his bread. Didn't get the finish, but improves to 8-1. We'll see what he does next. Oh boy, it's time to talk about Michael Pagani versus Mason Jones, the fight of the year so far in Cage Warriors. I've got a little short list that I keep with everything throughout the year, just so it's easier for me to do my end of year awards. And fight of the year, I had things like Amir Malekpour versus Sam Creasy, or not Sam Creasy versus Sam Creasy's brother, of course. James Sheehan versus Daniel Conrad, which was nuts. James Power versus Daniel Kalasinski, sorry, which was also awesome. Joanny Scott versus Joe Harris last week. Giordano Martignoni also last week. But I think Jones Pagani, I think it takes it, and probably by a country mile as well. I was probably leaning Joanny Scott, Joe Harris, just because you guys know I'm a bit of a grappling nut. So that was more the fight I was leaning until this happened. And yeah, Mason Jones and Michael Pagani, unbelievable fight. A back and forth scrap until Mason Jones took over and absolutely bullied Michael Pagani halfway through the fight. First round was amazing. Jones putting his foot on the gas early as usual, but Pagani keeping him honest with these glancing check hooks every time Mason Jones entered range. It looked like Jones, well, the jab from Jones really started landing early, pawing away at Pagani, and we'll continue talking about that jab because it's really how Mason Jones managed to take over in this fight. But first round, there was a lot of Jones leading the dance, landing, glancing uppercuts. Pagani was a little inactive to start the first round, but he was making his reads, he was countering when he had to. The second half of the first round is where it got interesting. Jones lands a spinning hook kick on the neck of Pagani, a spinning back elbow, and Pagani's just eating it. But then Pagani freezes Jones with an uppercut that people, I had Ocelot MMA, people who follow Ocelot on Twitter, I had Ocelot tweeting me that perhaps the uppercut might have swung around in Pagani's favor after I tweeted 10-9 Jones, and I really don't disagree. I think the first round could have easily gone either way to either guy. I also had the customary gambling guy, doesn't follow Cage Warriors, doesn't follow the Yellow Gloves podcast, clearly searching for fighters' names or searching for the hashtag on Twitter, throwing up laughing emojis saying, "Oh, what kind of fight are you watching?" Yeah, fuck off. Like 10-9 Jones, 10-9 Pagani. Either way, none of it is laughable, whichever way you land. Lo and behold, I click on the guy's profile, and his last 5 tweets are all like X emojis of all the bets he's lost on Cage Warriors today. So yeah, get fucked. Awesome round, really, from both men. Like just an insane round. Had it 10-9 Jones, but Pagani started to build momentum fast late in that round. So again, could have gone either way. I loved Pagani's stiff right hand just splitting Jones's guard. Left hook clipping Jones as well. The momentum was definitely swinging. But in the second round, this is where Jones really just started to look unbelievable. Jab, stance switch, jab, just doubling on that left jab. Once he saw that Pagani's eye was swelling up and there was a cut and it just started to look really nasty, all you saw was Pagani bang, 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 just pouring that left jab in there. And eventually, what happens, the great thing about the jab, and we talk about this sometimes, is like it's not just that you're landing, it's also that you're impairing people's vision at the same time. They've got this big glove coming into the direction of their eye. Like it makes it hard for people to know what shot is coming next if you're jabbing and then putting something behind that. Like you're starting your combination with a jab. And that's what Mason Jones did because he, like I said, was leading the dance with that left jab, leading, and then bang, it's a left hook. So he goes left jab, left hook, just one behind the other. The left hook behind the jab, and then drops Michael Pagani. Tried to advance the side control, but eventually settled in half guard, just elbowing away Pagani. And then what I loved was Mason Jones just got up and he just, asked Pagani to get up as well. He wanted to finish him on the feet, clearly. Playing with his food a little bit, perhaps. And I know that Mason Jones might have regretted that because Pagani just did not go away during this fight. As much as Mason Jones started to take over, Pagani always looked dangerous. Spinning hook kick from Jones in round two, elbow over the top, stabbing teep up the middle. Pagani had a nice like arm drag takedown, which was really cool in this round. But both guys just popping right back up to their feet. Incredible pace in round two, but all Mason Jones. 1919 maybe. I had it 2018 Mason Jones going into the third. Third round from Pagani was actually good for maybe the first minute and the last 30 seconds, I'd say. Check hook from Pagani, kind of the work he was doing in the first round, being more patient, check hook whenever Jones would enter the pocket, because at this point Jones was entering the pocket with reckless abandon, and Pagani wasn't doing much to stop him. This was a good, I hesitate to say adjustment, because he started the fight doing it, then forgot to do it, then started doing it again. But I loved it. It's always good to see a fighter, take a bit of a beating in a round, come back and just have that wherewithal to adjust. And again, I don't want to call it an adjustment, but kind of is at the same time. But yeah, Mason Jones round three, stiff right hand, digging with that left hand to the body, spinning back kick to the body. Pagani firing that straight hand through the guard. Um, the inside fighting was awesome from Mason Jones. That uppercut he loves to throw. He always throws that combination where he goes straight hook uppercut, and he throws it quite a lot, and it's quite vicious, and it's always in really close proximity. Jones has started bullying Pagani in the pocket, in the clinch, just beautiful violence all around. Pagani does get the takedown maybe 2.5 minutes into the round, or 3 minutes into the round, but Jones pops right back up. There's a body shot in there from Pagani that kind of stops Jones in his tracks for just a second, but Jones ends the fight on top, double leg takedown. A tremendous, tremendous fight. It's absolutely the best fight of the year in Cage Warriors. 15-2, Mason Jones improves to. Michael Pagani suffers his first career loss, 7-1 now. But one of those fights where, if you follow Frey on Twitter, Alfredo, huge Italian, he's Mr. Italian MMA, and I tweeted him after the fight, and I said that I'm more certain of Pagani's talent today than I was yesterday. Like even in a loss, you saw what this guy was made of. You saw the metal that this guy has. You saw him push a guy like Mason Jones. Mason Jones after the fight saying that's the toughest fight he's ever had in Cage Warriors, which says a lot. Um, Mason Jones shouldn't be in Cage Warriors. Let's be real. Like he walked from the UFC. There was obviously some contractual dispute there. Mason Jones would be an absolutely amazing addition to the UFC roster once again if they took him back, because he doesn't have to be here having these wars with prospects when he really should just be in the UFC chasing his dream, right? He's 15-2 now. He's got nothing left to prove in Cage Warriors. I'm not complaining, though. It gives me an opportunity to talk about his fights on the pod. But yeah, again, all credit in the world to Pagani. It's one of those where sometimes we say, oh, wow, what heart from that fighter because he got battered. But here it was what heart from Pagani, but also he looked amazing. He looked great. He gave Mason Jones almost as good as he got. But when Mason Jones when you let him get into the pocket and you don't discourage him from fighting in that pocket, he's going to bully you and rip you to shreds. And he did. 4 wins in a row now since returning to Cage Warriors for Mason Jones. Yeah, guaranteed entertainment every time this guy fights. What a fighter. What a fight from both men. Can't wait to see how their careers unfold after this fight. I think Pagani will see him again. Pagani's a guy for sure will be in the UFC one day or will be fighting for Cage Warriors gold. Mason Jones, is that the last time we see him in Cage Warriors? Who knows? Elsewhere on the main card, we had Adam Cullen versus Samuel Jan Blasco. Blasco stepping in on, I guess, around a week's notice to replace Ermil Shafiri, which would have been an awesome next gen MMA versus GB top team fight. Jan Blasco, 12-14, only Cage Warriors appearance was a decision loss to Agi Sardari. Blasco known as pretty much just being a tough nut to crack. This obviously, yes, has a losing record, but generally is quite a difficult guy to put out to pasture early. And Adam Cullen, 7-2 coming into this, coming off a split decision loss to Harold Cohen, which I think that he won that fight. And I remember we spoke about it on the pod. It could have gone either way, but I scored it for Cullen. Cullen was 6-0 until losing 2 of his next 3 fights. So some of the shine has rubbed off for a lot of people, but the core of a great fighter is still there. And we saw that in this fight. Adam Cullen improving to 8-2 with a third round TKO finish. He beat the ever-living piss out of Jan Blasko. First round, dominant, controlling. Blasko, a very weird approach of walking backwards, even when Cullen wasn't pressing him, just accepting that he wanted to have his back against the fence and trying to swing these hooks that never landed. And Cullen was just piecing him up with the elbows over the top, the knees in the clinch, the jab. Cullen looked great, scored it 10-9 to him in round one. Round two, I gave him a 10-8, just absolutely clobbering Blasko. I don't know how Blasko survived for as long as he did, but we entered interesting territory in round two and then subsequently round three, where every time a fight has left round one for Adam Cullen, he's lost, right? He was knocked out in the third round by Dimitri Gerlin, and then he lost the decision to Harold Cohen. So whenever we've seen this guy exit the first round, it hasn't gone well for him. And it's you do this podcast, you do what I do, and you root for people. Of course, you root for people and people who you've been covering, people who have been in the promotion for a while. And I just wanted to see Adam Cullen get his hand raised beyond the first round. And I can't begin to imagine how much that meant to him, how much that meant to his camp, to his team at Next Gen MMA. You saw the emotions at the end of the fight. Third round TKO via ground and pound for Adam Cullen. Finally gets his hand raised beyond the first round. This is going to be a huge confidence booster for him. Granted, he's beat far better opposition. Jan Blasko is by no means like a quality operator in the cage or by any means dangerous to someone like Adam Cullen. But a win is a win nonetheless, right? And Adam Cullen did it in a fashion that we've never seen him do before. So we learned something new about Cullen. We saw that he can go all the way, still get his finishes late, still dominate a fight. He looked amazing. Props to Adam Cullen, 8-2 now. Look forward to seeing how they match him up next. Maybe set up that Ermel Shafiri fight again, because I'm all ready for the GB top team Next Gen MMA wars. I see, Brad Pickett and the Next Gen MMA guys jawing away at each other on Instagram. I think it's a nice competitive rivalry coming out of the UK right now. The next fight we'll talk about was Stefano Paterno versus Oli Santalati at welterweight. A really awesome fight, in all honesty. The pendulum swinging, momentum going either way pretty much throughout the fight. Round one, loved Paterno's work, the body jab, the clubbing overhand off the calf kick. I tweeted it about a minute into the first round. I said, Stefano Paterno's made the read. He's got that overhand that's coming, it's coming in because Santalati keeps pulling his head back as a form of defense, right? And, while Paterno didn't manage to get the finish in that way, it was still something he was able to exploit to get the first round to go his way. Really dominant opening frame for him. But you saw, the calf kick starting to add up in round one. But Paterno, towards the end of the round, started to look decent, realized that he can enter close range in combination. Like every time he tried to enter within that range with singular strikes, Paterno was just like, okay, calf kick, overhand, back you go. And, Santalati realized, okay, I'm going to throw a couple of strikes, throw 2-3 strikes, and that's how I'm going to get into range. So Paterno dominated the opening frame, but you could tell Santalati was starting to warm into the fight. Second round was a dangerous one for Paterno. Just an absolute domination from Oli Santalati. Paterno had the club and calf kick early, but shot really lazily out in the open. Santalati then, used the neck attack to defend the takedown and then just held onto that neck for ages with just one hook, really, just kneeing away Paterno's head, kneeing over and over again, managed to cut Paterno open. Paterno dropped to a knee at one point just to kind of, remove the ability from Santalati to knee him in the head. Obviously, knees to grounded opponents for the time being is still an illegal strike. Obviously, it would still be illegal because he dropped a knee. I think the rule now is that your hand doesn't invalidate the move effectively. But Santalati dominated in the grappling, positional awareness, like attacking the hands and arms just to ground him and stop Paterno from flailing and trying to scramble. Paterno looked heavy, looked less loose in his movement when they returned to their feet towards the end of round two. Santalati confident, jabbing well, had it 19-19 in that one going into round three. But Paterno in round 3 just turns it the fuck up, stuffs the shot from Santolati early, cracks him with a big right hand left hook. Santolati kind of skating around the cage. Paterno manages to get him down straight into half guard, setting up the head and arm choke, but you're not going to get that really on a guy like Santolati, who is, BJJ black belt and a very credible grappler in his own right. But every time in this round that Santolati tried to wrestle, Paterno would just stuff it. When they'd get back to their feet, Paterno jab in. The grappling pace slowed him down in round 2, but in round 3, he looked fresh as a daisy. And what happens shortly thereafter is Paterno double jab, clobbers him with the right hand, gets the knockout with a minute left in the fight. Incredible finish. I tweeted this and I'll read it verbatim. I said, "This is the importance of the double jab in microcosm." Paterno snaps Santolati's head back, uses the second jab to feed his opponent the right hand over the top. That's exactly it, right? The double jab, and I said this as well, double jab is a cheat code that's rarely used in MMA. It really shouldn't even be a cheat code, right? Like it's a you're doubling up on one of the most basic fundamental movements of boxing. But MMA fighters don't always conform to traditional fundamental moves, and Turner does, and it was an awesome, brilliant KO shortlist for me on finish of the year without a doubt. Stefano Paterno, really interesting one here. NDH330 on Twitter tweeted me and said, "Who are your picks for the next prize fighter tournament?" So we know that the next prize fighter tournament is at £170. We know that Cage Warriors are going to be hosting that in the Scotland card in September. We also know that they're going to start announcing the fighters or teasing some of the fighters in the next week. Stefano Paterno has to be in there, so it's why I've kind of wrapped this question into this portion of the card breakdown. Paterno has to be in there. Another guy I'd love to see in there is Sean Clancy Jr. I think it's an absolute no-brainer. Those are the two guys that have to be in there, in my opinion. There's been rumors that there's going to be fighters who haven't fought in Cage Warriors making an appearance on this prize fighter tournament, so I think that we'll likely see less rostered names in the tournament, but Sean Clancy Jr., Stefano Paterno, those two need to be in there. Adam Shelley versus Ieuan Davies was is the next fight that we'll talk about. Ieuan Davies 4-0, grappling whiz, one of the best prospects in the UK. I've been saying it for a very long time. Adam Shelley riding a nice 3-fight win streak, Taekwondo specialist, a lanky freak of a man at 155 pounds. We last saw him in September when he beat Matthew Camilleri. We'll talk about after this fight, actually. Ieuan Davies improves to 5-0 with a rapid rear naked choke. The finishing sequence was beautiful because it's a foot sweep attempt that kind of knocks Shelley off balance, and Ieuan Davies just spins, leaps onto Shelley's back, secures his hooks in to get Shelley down, body triangle, sinks in the rear naked choke, draws the tap, 5-0, 5 finishes for Ieuan Davies, who for me is one of the best prospects coming out of the UK. Doesn't get enough love or hype in wider MMA circles, in my opinion. But I tweeted this after the fight, but I said, do yourselves a favor and jump on the hype train now. Because, yeah, Ieuan Davies probably in the next 18 months, we'll probably see him fighting for Cage Warriors Gold if he continues in this way. Adam Shelley looked decent for the first half of round 1, and Davies started to really take over. You could have argued Shelley took the first round actually, just based off the work he did in the first half. But yeah, the minute Davies, starts kicking and prodding away at your body, and he just gets in these clinches and he's able to get you down, or it might not even. It's like this one. This wasn't even a takedown. It was just a foot sweep attempt that doesn't actually pay off, but knocks Shelley off balance. That's all Davies needs to get the back. 5-0 now. Ieuan Davies, another amazing performance from him. Cannot wait to see how they match him up next. The main card opener was between Matthew Camilleri and Emanuele Sabatino. I personally scored it 29-28 Camilleri. It was a split decision, and Camilleri was very frustrated at that because after the fight and after the scorecards are read out, he runs straight up to the camera and removes his mouth guard and says, "Hey, fuck that judge," which was an awesome moment for the adopted next gen MMA man. Camilleri, like you guys know, a guy I enjoy watching, nicknamed the Squid. a grappling maverick. Just once he gets top control, and once he gets on top in general, really hard to get him off. And Sabatino struggled with that. Sabatino, in my opinion, looked very good defensively on the ground, didn't allow himself to get put in any compromising positions, but at the same time had no sweeps, had no escapes, had really nothing to get back to his feet or to dissuade Camilleri from controlling the fight in the manner in which he was doing. Camilleri 8-0 now, 2 wins in a row. It wasn't a very entertaining fight, but it was an entertaining matchup and an interesting matchup. Classic grappler versus striker, and Camilleri came out on top, in my opinion. I don't think there was enough there in round 2, let alone round 3, to argue Sabatino winning the fight. So uncertain how the judge saw it that way. But Matthew Camilleri gets his hand raised nonetheless. We'll kick off now the prelims with the prelim headliner, which was between Craig Rawlins and George Smith. And we'll rattle through these pretty quickly because we had a lot of finishes on the prelims. George Smith, 3 years away from Cage Warriors, fighting in a heap of other promotions. 2-2 in Cage Warriors, lost twice in a row before leaving, but to former champions Matt Bonner and Mick Stanton. So no shame and no harm there. George Smith, the hometown guy. Craig Rawlins made his Cage Warriors debut earlier this year in March, suffered a third round heel hook loss actually to the undefeated Thomas Nichols Burton, who is very highly rated. This was a fight I was excited for. Two guys with a lot to prove, two guys who are pretty regular finishers of fights. And all it took, George Smith, was a round to enact his just an exceptional grappling sequence that for me is one of my favorite finishes on this card. We had Rawlins attacking this far side Kimura, trying to pass into mount, and then George Smith, omoplata trying to sweep. Eventually, Smith sweeps him with the most beautiful Kimura, sweeps him into an armbar, which Rawlins gets out of, only to get caught in a triangle choke. Unreal finish, unreal level of grappling. Amazing. Honestly, watch that finish if you haven't. Just quick grappling pace from George Smith, just quick thinking, elite level problem solving on the mat, off his back, the sweep, the submission. Yeah, just an awesome finish, and I hope people give it the love it deserves. George Smith improves to 7-4, gets back in the win column in Cage Warriors, winning record in Cage Warriors, and took next to no damage. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see him again this year. We then had a flyweight scrap between Connor Wilson and Raz Bring. Really enjoyed this fight. Very, very fun, as the flyweights usually are in Cage Warriors. Scored it 30-27, Connor Wilson. I think he fought at a ridiculously high pace, didn't fade, kept his lead hand in Raz Bring's face all fight long. Bring was game, but he was heavily outlanded throughout the fight and handily outlanded too. For every strike that Bring landed, Connor Wilson put 3 or 4 in his face. The jab was lovely. The spinning kicks to the body were great. Just a masterclass in cage cutting. And I wanted to make a point of this as the next gen MMA guys are just, the footwork is unreal, especially, Connor Wilson, Luke Riley, Fran Breen. We'll talk about Breen later. In a few minutes, of course, Breen lost, but you still saw the stuff that makes these guys dangerous on the feet. It's not just that they're pressure fighters, but it's what they're doing with their footwork. They're pinning guys against the cage. They're keeping guys, in almost this limbo where they can't move laterally, because whenever they do, the next gen guy's already a step ahead. They're already there. Jab, jab. They're going to your body. Connor Wilson, amazing in this fight, improves to 6-3. A marquee win for him, a win that I think he needed, a very dominant win. Yes, he didn't get the finish, but when you look that good, the finish doesn't really matter, in my opinion. In keeping with the flyweight theme, we had Florian Doska versus Christian Tebbit. Doska, a grinder who debuted in Cage Warriors last year and got pounded out by Amir Malikpour, 5-3 coming into this fight, versus the 3-3 Christian Tebbit, who's a fun fighter, a proper entertainer. Lost his Cage Warriors debut in a very, very close fight to Andy Yates that could have gone either way. But this fight, for me, I scored it 29-28 Doska. I thought Tebbit stole the third round, and always looked in the fight, don't get me wrong, but Doska was very aggressive. Kept a ridiculous pace. Both guys did, to be fair. was a tremendous fight. Round one could have been a swing round. I mean, Tebbit could have won this fight. Don't get me wrong. First round was very close. Third round was definitely his. Second round was definitely Doska's. But I just think Doska landed the more damaging shots throughout the fight, really poured it on Christian Tebbit. A very impressive win for Doska, and Tebbit, his stock doesn't go down despite having a losing record now after this fight. His stock doesn't drop after a fight like that. Another really fun one at flyweight, but Doska improves to 6-3, gets his win in the yellow gloves, and I'm certain, almost certain, if they did a Cage Warriors flyweight prize fighter, which I don't think they will do, but just a flyweight tournament, I think Doska would be in there just for his pace and his ability to keep that cardio going for so long. Before the card started, I tweeted, I said something along the lines of good morning and happy Mariusz Michalajewski versus Manuel de la Valle fight day, or some shit like that. Which is all to say that Manuel de la Valle and Mariusz Michalajewski, two guys who are very violent and crazy welterweights. Michalajewski, a guy we saw get one of the knockouts of the year over Joshua and Wardy earlier in the year. Manuel de la Valle making his Cage Warriors debut, 22 fight amateur career, 2-0 as a pro. Had that IMAF experience as an amateur, a wild banger with some great submissions, and this fight didn't disappoint. Of course it wouldn't. Round one, I scored it to Mariusz. I thought, he looked sharp on the feet, clipped De La Valle with a big knee as De La Valle was trying to shoot in, feinting the straight, and De La Valle was like covering up when Michalajewski had just feinted that straight hand. There was a bit of hesitation, I felt. The dipping straight to the body was really nice from Mariusz, following up with a big head kick that never really landed flush, but always landed on the guard of Del Valle. Del Valle got his takedown with 30 seconds to go, but Michalajewski, awesome triangle armbar, which Del Valle managed to pass into side control and into north-south. So there was the thing with Mariusz is like, when he goes on his back, he's still very dangerous. And Del Valle is just like a hunter on the ground. He's so good. So there was a great grappling exchange towards the end of the round. Round two, though, Mariusz jumps Gilly, loses his position, and that's when the fight goes very bad for him. Del Valle transitions straight into mount with plenty of time to go, pounding away at Mariusz's head, who was really trapped, crushing elbows. Goddard gave Mariusz a very, very long leash. The fight could have been stopped multiple times in that second round. Del Valle gets bumped off, goes into side control, and just continues pounding away. Second round ends, and I'm waiting for round three, but then you see Mariusz gets up, wobbled, tries to walk to his corner, and just can't make that walk, and Goddard just waves it off. Just a real beatdown in round two from Manuel Del Valle, who now improves to 3-0. A very dangerous, scary prospect of a man, especially after losing the first round. The way he came out in round two, I need to see this guy fight again in Cage Warriors. I need to see him get more fights. We're talking about prize fighter earlier. Is he one of those young, up and coming guys that you throw in there like a Shirzad Kadrian, and you see if they sink or swim? Perhaps that could happen. I mean, this guy seems like a wild man and probably could finish a lot of people on the roster. Davide Scarano versus Fran Breen ended in a first round submission for Scarano. Fran Breen, a massive prospect, one of my favorites, as you guys know. But unfortunately for him, and fortunately for Scarano just absolutely put the pace of a lifetime on Fran Breen, who's a very fast guy himself. But Scarano just put it on him, put a ridiculous pace on him. A beat down on the ground, a beat down against the fence, and then towards the end of the first round, with mere seconds left, Scarano powers in on a takedown, lands into half guard, passes to mount, transitions to an armbar beautifully and cranks on it. Incredible submission and a great win for Scarano, who gets his hands raised in the yellow gloves, which we hadn't ever seen. He was 0-2 in the promotion, improves now to 5-2 overall as a pro. So yeah, props to Davide Scarano. Giuseppe Mastrogiacomo versus Hossein Mosavi is the next fight we'll talk about. I was really excited for this because Mastrogiacomo is one of my favorite prospects out of Italy, 4-0. and made his Cage Warriors debut last year and jabbed the ever-living hell out of his opponent before eventually finishing the fight with the jab. Musavi making his Cage Warriors debut, very exciting prospect, 2-0, and one of the best unsigned fighters in the UK before he got his Cage Warriors contract. Trains under Owen Livesey. Great grappling prowess on this guy, and Mastro Giacomo just looked absolutely incredible in this fight. Managed to get the third round finish every time Musavi shot on a takedown. Even if he got Mastro Giacomo down, Mastro Giacomo right back up to his feet. Genuinely so impressed with Mastro Giacomo, because Musavi's going to barrel and roll over a lot of people in Cage Warriors. This win will age really well, trust me. Musavi looked spent towards the end of round two. He didn't take any round. All the rounds were in Mastro Giacomo's favor. And then in round three, pumping the jab early, which was dissuading Musavi from pressing. Even when Musavi did manage to get in on the takedown, the underhooks were really good from Mastro Giacomo. The knees on the exit, just beautiful stuff. He always found little pockets in between these massive grappling exchanges to deal his damaging shots and swing every round in his favor. But he didn't need the scorecards, because late into round three, he goes to the body twice with a roundhouse kick, which stings Musavi, follows up with a left hook, right elbow, we'll call it a elbow because it really was, drops Musavi. Follow-up shots are deemed enough by the ref. 5-0 now for Mastro Giacomo, 2-0 in Cage Warriors with 2 finishes. At 145 pounds, I think we've got a very, very big prospect coming out of Italy. The early prelim portion of the card was exceptionally violent, and we'll work our way through it now. Callum Parker versus Jack Claffey. Look, if you listen to this, you probably follow me on Twitter, right? And if you don't, I'll just give you the quick lowdown. I'm not a gambling man, I'm not a betting man, but I saw Callum Parker was an underdog coming into this fight, which is clearly people looking at records and betting just looking at records, because Callum Parker's 2-4 and Jack Claffey's 2-1. This is the importance of tape study and the importance of watching fights, my friends. I gave a yellow gloves tip, right? This is the official yellow gloves tip. Maybe I'll do this more often, but I don't want to attract the gambling degenerates. But I basically tweeted that, Callum Parker, put your money on this guy, because yes, he's lost 4 in a row. Yes, he's 2-4. He's twice the fighter Jack Claffey is. And it showed, because all it took was less than 90 seconds in round one. Parker pressing early, lead left hand, right to the body, kept going to that body, softening that area up big time. What happens? Claffey drops his guard to protect his body. Parker staggers him with a right hand over the top, follows up with a left hook that face plants Claffey, and the referee decided he'd seen enough. Claffey tried to protest, but it's bad optics, man. You get face planted, you're not building back up to your feet. The fight's going to get stopped whether you're there or you're not. But that win must have felt great for Parker. Snaps a 4-fight skid in a big way. He might be the best 3 and 4 fighter on the planet, in all honesty. And there's still big things to come from Callum Parker. I think he's going to have one of those real underdog careers where you might look back at his record 5 years from now and you're like, wow, Callum Parker had a pretty unfortunate start to his career, but look at him now. I could easily see this guy in the UFC. I could see him in a PFL, in a big promotion in the future. Sticking my neck out there, a lot of people would turn their nose up at the record, but like people say, records are for DJs. If you watch Callum Parker fight, you watch his fight with Luke Riley, this guy was always on the cusp of getting his hand raised again, and he got it in a big way against Jack Claffey. So props to Callum Parker. Matteo Martignoni versus Damon Donald was an awesome fight. 1-0 versus 2-0. Matteo Martignoni, the brother, of course, of Michele Martignoni. Really enjoyed this performance from Damon Donald. His pace was ridiculous. We spoke about cage cutting earlier. We spoke about footwork earlier. This guy put on a fucking clinic. Really fantastic round in the first round. I thought Martignoni maybe edged it, but like I said, I really liked Donald's footwork. I could see him building into the fight. Towards the end of round one, you could see Martignoni was struggling to get to the center. He was doing enough off the back foot, but Donald was starting to find his range, starting to find his combinations. And you saw it in round two. Damon Donald, just an absolute deconstruction, dismantling of the undefeated Matteo Martignoni. Body shot, right hand over the top, drops Martignoni late into round two. Damon Donald lands a few elbows, Haragoshi to end the round. Martignoni was really saved by the bell. I was expecting a third round, and yeah, Damon Donald he broke Matteo Martignoni. Martignoni's team, his corner, call it off in between rounds. Donald's pace and cardio is frightening. 145 pounds, 2-0 now as a pro, 15 AMI fights behind him. A big prospect out of Scotland with a big win here. Just an absolute striking clinic, a masterclass in movement, a masterclass in footwork. Damon Donald has gained a new fan in me, and I'm very excited to see what he does next. Leon Naumann versus Naglias Kanisauskas also took place on this card, and it was as devastatingly violent as we expect a Naglias Kanisauskas fight to be. Naumann came into this fight 5-1, making his Cage Warriors debut. First time fighting someone with a winning record, though. Kanisauskas, on the other hand, 7-3, with two of his losses in Cage Warriors to the current champion Bellandi and to the former title challenger Will Curry, who's likely going to be in the UFC when he potentially wins his Dana White Contender Series fight in a month or so. Naumann did some really good work in this fight, actually, and looked dangerous, but always looked slower than Kanisauskas. Kanisauskas, dangerous with everything he threw. Kanisauskas also looked a bit slow, but he just finds a way to be aggressive, even if he doesn't always have the pace, and he was faster than Naumann anyways. Overwhelming Naumann towards the end of round two, landing some great punishing strikes. The uppercut was good. He was just a savvier man, started fighting behind his jab, switching stances. You could see he was feeling it. At one point in the second round, he lands 6 uppercuts in a row, like Gustafsson Teixeira vibes, but except there was more volume and probably less power. Kanisauskas digging deep to the body on an uppercut as well. But towards the end of that round, just when you think round three's coming and Kanisauskas just has to see himself over the line, what does Kanisauskas do? He's had 7 wins, all 7 via finish, scores another one, another finish, another win to improve to 8-3. Left jab, presses forward, one hitter quitter of a right hook, knocks Naumann out with seconds to go. One of the knockouts of the card. One of the finishes of the year for me as well. Definitely put that in my shortlist. Kanisauskas improves to 8-3, and like we spoke about earlier, definitely in the title picture as well. This next portion of fights we talk about, there's 3 left, and it's the common theme here is the old, potentially, shot and losing record Brazilians, apart from Diego Dixon, which had a winning record just about. Effectively, this is the layup portion of the card. 9-2 Dylan Hazan against 5-6 Elvis Oliveira. It went as much as as well as you would have expected it to for Dylan Hazan. One of the knockouts of the year, flying knee. I won't spend too long talking about it. Hazan battered him in round 1 and then got the highlight finish in round 2 as he was supposed to. But returns to the win column does Dylan Hazan in a big way, which will be a big confidence boost for him. Another really fun fighter at 125 pounds. I think Cage Warriors need to put a prize fighter going at that weight class because I think it would be absolutely bonkers. We had Teddy Stringer versus Maikon Kobayashi, who missed weight at catch weight. Kobayashi coming in on short notice. Teddy Stringer was supposed to fight the 4-2 opponent, whose name I can't remember, and it was supposed to be more of a competitive one, but it just turned out to be another showcase for Teddy Stringer, another scalp, another first round rear naked choke submission, less than 90 seconds into the fight. Teddy Stringer just treated Maikon Kobayashi as the 6-9 fighter that he was coming into it. And then the prelim opener, or the early prelim opener, was between Simone Patrizzi and Diego Dixon. Listen, Dixon looked really good in this fight. In round 1, really impressive was Diego Dixon. I thought he won the first round, looked great on the feet, really great on the feet, actually. I thought he'd want to wrestle more, but, he did have some grappling exchanges here, and he looked good in round 1. Patrizzi looked a bit tentative in round 1, but round 2, Dixon throws a roundhouse to the body. Patrizzi catches his leg, takes him down, barrels him over, and Patrizzi just starts punching at his head. Like there ain't even anything crazy for me to discuss here. Like Patrizzi just like, cool, I'm in your guard. I'm gonna start punching your head really hard. Diego Dixon from the first shot, I don't know if it's a broken orbital or something, gets punched once, immediately kind of not keels over because he's already on his back, but like you can see he kind of folds a bit, and then it's just an onslaught of strikes. Referee decides he's seen enough, so Simone Patrizzi improved to 7-2 at 155 pounds. And that wraps up the breakdown and analysis of Cage Warriors 175. A really awesome card. To have done this and the London card back to back, like Saturday and Thursday. I've spoken about every single fight. I think it's, 39 fights that we've spoken about in the last 5 days, or in the last 6 days. I can't math. It's been grueling but fun. And yeah, props to Cage Warriors. It just shows how deep this roster is, that they can put together two really compelling, exciting cards that give us 3 fight of the year contenders, multiple finish of the year contenders, big prospects winning, but also big prospects getting knocked down a peg as well by underdogs. Yeah, just a really fun one in Manchester. Didn't quite reach the heights of the London card for me, but it was never going to, because that London card was just utterly insane. But it was nonetheless one of the cards of the year, very entertaining, a lot to remember. Mason Jones, Pagani, I won't forget that fight for a very long time. Next time we talk, guys, it will likely be the Cage Warriors 176 breakdown, September 7th. We've got Chris Bungard headlining the card, but we've also got a prize fighter tournament, which we'll see announcements for in the next week or so. So if you don't already, follow Yellow Gloves Pod on Twitter, on Instagram, always doing fight analysis, always tweeting about upcoming fights, always covering anything Cage Warriors. September will be a big one for the promotion. 3 cards in September, including back-to-back cards, as in a Friday and a Saturday card. Cage Warriors 177 and 178 in Manchester. We know we're going to have a title fight there between James Sheehan and Yanis Bakar. It's going to be a pretty epic end to the year, I think, for Cage Warriors. But that's all from me. If you enjoyed the pod, as always, please like, review, share it on Twitter, share it on Instagram. Do what you've got to do to spread the word of the Yellow Gloves pod. We've gained a tremendous amount of love and attention over the last week, just from the amount of work I've been putting in on social media, doing more technical analysis, which is really my bag, that I feel like I don't do enough of for the podcast. I feel like I do a lot of breakdown stuff, and we talk about the fights, but we don't really do we do the technical stuff on the pod, but we don't do the technical stuff outside of the pod on social media, which is obviously where we can get a lot of eyeballs. So there's been a lot of love, a lot of new followers, a lot of new listeners. So if you're new around these parts, there's a lot of stuff for you to catch up on if you want to go listen to older episodes. But stay tuned. There's always going to be more episodes of this. And yeah, like I said, spread the love, and I will catch you all on the next one.